Sup, just left in 2 rounds to end the Grand Six Tour in Romania. Van Forest is in the top of the leaderboard, tied with Vincent Keimer and Fabiano Caruana, who face each other in the 8th round. And he have the opportunity of being solo leader, facing Sindarov, who won the previous game against Vincent Keimer. So let's see what's happening in this game. Van Forest opened with d4, knight f6, c4, e6 by Sindarov, knight f3, d5, and Sindarov saw that he's very well prepared with bishop before in this position. So for that reason, Van Forest tried g3. But yes, Sindarov is very well prepared against g3 as well as he saw in this game. He played bishop b7, the main move, bishop g2, Sol castle d takes, queen c2, and here the main move is a6 with the idea of face queen before with queen c4 with d5. But Sindarov prepared the move c6 for this game. C6 is a little bit strange because black, to completely equalize the position, should play c5 one day. So it's a little bit strange to play c6 if you later going to play c5. But well prepared with the machine, c6 is a good move, and you finally managed to play c5. But at the first glance, look a little bit strange. But it's completely playable. C6 by Sindarov, queen c4, b5. Here, white can go back or to c2, d3, or b3. Both are playable. For example, queen d3, knight d7. The black plan is going to play c5 later. For example, queen b3, bishop b7, knight here, or this is a possibility. But for a return to the most normal square, with c2, bishop b7 by Sindarov, following his plan of develop all the pieces to break with c5, rook d1, knight b7, knight c3, queen b6, and here white have some ideas to trying to prevent c5, for example, knight e5, but just rook f8 here, or for example a4, b4, a5, queen a6, it's another possibility for white. He tried a4, trying to face e5 with the normal breakthrough with e5, but let's see that black uh, finally make his plan, which play with c5. But okay, white have some ideas. Here, e4, knight e5, and now very good move, bishop d5, trading the e7, trying to trade the e7 bishop, who is very strong, because covers the d6 square, cover and defense c5, and the c1 bishop used to be the worst piece in the queen's gambit for white. So very good game, bishop d5, trying to trade this bishop. And now they're entering a fourth line that both players have played so good and ended in an equal position. Knight b4 is natural. Queen here, and now they enter just in a fourth line, where all the pieces are hanging. Bishop f3. Now you can recapture here because bishop g5. So he played. And if d takes c5, I don't analyze that, but I suppose that bishop c5 and later taking on f2 is enough. Okay, knight c5. So for the reason he take on c5 first. Um, yeah, sorry, I missed, yes. He take, yeah, I was thinking, if he take on f3, bishop d5, and if he takes on e7, here you have bishop d1 maybe, or bishop d2. You can select if you take, because if you take the rook later, the rook is hanging, so maybe you can take this bishop too. But okay, he makes d takes c5, now knight c5, bishop e7, bishop d1, queen d1, and now black is have a exchange up, but both black rooks are under attack. So he just moved the a8 rook. He prefers to trade the dark square bishop than this light square bishop, because this dark square bishop are attacking both knights. Bishop takes, rooks takes f8 was slightly better according to the machine. But okay, take here, both players are making a very good game. He take with the king, who is completely fine. And yes, the position now looks more or less equal. White should take care about this pawn, because okay, this pawn gives special advantage, but could be weak in one day, and black have more space in the queen side. So, but in the other hand, this bishop is very powerful, controlling all this diagonal. But so the position is more or less equal, like I say. Queen e2, here is another option for white. Van Forest played 94 trading pieces. But okay, Queen e2 is very natural, preventing rook d8. And if rook d8 now, knight takes b5. But black is very active and black have good counterplay for the pawn. Knight b3 before he can play before. Knight b4, taking back the pawn. Knight d6, knight d3 again, queen d2. But okay, the position is more or less equal. But after queen e2, black should play active with rook d8 because if a6, rook d1 taking the, the open file, and white is better here, so black should play active here with rook d8. But I'm sure that if Van Forest played queen e2, I'm sure that Sindaroff is going to respond with rook d8 because he's a very, very active player who doesn't care so much about the material. 94 by Van Forest, rook d8, queen e2, take 96. And here, Van Forest just get crazy. With bishop takes c6, we have a completely equal position with only just a rook and a queen over the board, and as more or less symmetrical pawn structure, so this position should be a easy draw. For example, rook. Okay, black, white still need to take a little bit care about the a5 pawn, but just rook d1 trading rooks, or h4, and completely equal for white. This could be a bishop c6 and it's a draw. But here Van Forest just completely get crazy. He sacrificed the a5 pawn. I don't really understand why. He played rook c1, sacrificing the pawn. And after 95, he played queen h5. He have the idea that he's attacking e5 and he's attacking h7. But yeah, Sindarov defended in a very easy way with just f5. I don't know what is the idea of Van Forest. But f5 is not the only move. You can play just knight c4. And if queen e7, rook d2, black is completely winning, attacking f2. And the queen on h7 is not making nothing. So very, very strange idea here by Van Forest, who completely collapses. 95, queen h5, and she just completely gets crazy. Uh, but okay, so knight c4 could be enough to be winning, but f5, very, very good move by Sindarov. h3, he can take on e4 because the knight on e5 is hanging. So, queen d4 here was very strange, very strong. Just improving the queen, placing the queen in the center. The queen here is attacking, defending. The queen is very, very, very good place, and is attacking the bishop too. Instead of that, he played h6. It's natural too, defending the attacked pawn on h7, rook c2, and finally, Sindarov plays the queen on d4, placing well of his pieces and getting a completely winning position. But we're going to see that here in this endgame, black is completely winning, just for example, improving the king, and the position is completely winning because he have an extra pawn. One day, knight d3, rook b1 is coming, or king d6 could be another threat, or take more space here, and white have no active plans. Or yes, knight d3, which is the computer's move, just going for the f2 pawn, the b2 pawn, and black is completely winning. But I prefer king e7, easy move, just keeping all the control of the position. So let's see that black have a more active rook, a more active king, a knight in the center. This bishop's not making so much here. So here black is completely winning. But instead of that, Sindarov start to trade pawns and yes, complicating so much the game without necessity because when you have a pawn up in this type of games, trade pieces is a good idea. But trade pawns used to be a bad idea because in one day, if you trade many, many pawns, your opponent can sacrifice one of his pieces for your left-in pawns and make the draw. So as more pawns keeps over the board, it's better for the player who have an extra pawn. So when you are pawn down in a game, you should trade as much pawns as possible. But and when you are up a pawn in a game, you should trade pieces. Okay, the correct pieces, of course, not every piece, but you should try to keep pawns over the board. And with b4, with black, you are just trading more pawns, and this is a horrible move, of course, because just allows rook e2, trading pawns, 96, because now here black have 6 pawns. With king e7, you have all your pawns very safe. Or if you didn't want king e7, okay, I said 93. and all your pawns are completely safe. But okay, he started to trade pieces to trade pawns, and one of the problems is that he traded the e6 pawn. The problem of the e6 pawn is that later the f5 pawn is going to be so weak. 93, rook e6, and the rook is very active now. Now he can came for this pawns. For this pawn is now the rook is very active. Knight f2. Now rook e5. The 5 pawn is falling. Okay, he defends with g6, but the rook returns here. And if you play him here, maybe rook a6, very natural, going for the a7 pawn. He plays instead of that rook d2, trying to play active, but more pawns still falling. This 91, sorry. Here, rook a7 was an option, but it's more natural to play king g1 first, cutting the king. Knight c3, rook a7, and now we see that black only have 3 pawns. 9 moves ago, he has 6 pawns, and now white managed to trade to take 3 of these pawns. Rook a6, king c5, and here we are in the move 40, and both players fail here. Who is the move before the time control. Here, best move for white was just h4, and instead of that he played rook c6. The problem of this move is that allows white to play king d4, activating more his king. But both miss because Sindagoat doesn't take it advantage about the mistake of Van Forest um, playing king b5, and after rook h6 the position is it's not a dead draw, but black with an accurate play can hold. But like I said, the problem when you have less pawns over the board is that the player with in the defensive task, who have the defensive task, have he can sacrifice the piece for the left in pawns to make the draw. But here it's not so easy because king g1, knight b3, and at this moment I remember that I watched the game on live. And I thought, okay, if white managed to, for example, this position, but without these 3 pawns, just the position with the rook and the knight is a draw. Very easy draw. So I thought that if white managed to take the 5 pawn, the position is a draw. The most normal move to make that is rook h5, who was the move played by Van Forest, and after knight d4, defending the pawn, h4, and white is going to take the f5 pawn. Okay, that's what Van Forest think during the game, but this is incorrect. Because, okay, that's true that black pawn disappeared, but white pawns still being over the board. And the white pawns are going to help black to win this position. It's very strange, but sometimes happen in this type of games, that your own pawns benefit your opponent to cover files for you to defend. Let's see how can make what can make Van Forest here to draw the game. He have 2 moves, but both are very difficult. Maybe the most both ways are very difficult. For example, rook h8, trying to push 8 and to defend with the rook. For example, if knight d4, knight rook c8, very important move, cutting the king, and the machine say that here white can hold. But when you are, yes, when you have this type of position, you try to look for fourth line who capture the f5 pawn, or fourth line to trade the f5 pawn. It's very difficult to evaluate here the position. Here, when you are playing the game, you don't know if you are winning or you, sorry, if you are going to hold or if you are completely lost. You are trying to look for more concrete line to have the certeza of that you're going to make the draw. And here, if king c4, here g4, very important move, f4, rook f8, knight d4. Okay, knight d4 here doesn't work because the knight is pinned here. So this could be a way to make the draw with white. And the other possibility is d4. But the line that you should calculate is very hard. f4, of course, rook f6, knight d4, g5, f3, g6, king c4, king f1, king d3, and this is the key position where g7 doesn't work because after king e3 and the rook on f6 cannot take the king because e6 is covered and you are going to receive checkmate. But here rook f8 is the key move who holds the game. Of course, here if you reach this position, rook f8 is a very not very, but it's an easy move to play. The difficult is to make that to calculate everything from here, and you shouldn't not only calculate g4 that g4 is a draw. You should calculate and evaluate that rook h5, who is the natural move, who looks like you are making a draw lost. So the difficulty is not play in this exactly moment rook f8. Is calculate everything and evaluate that rook h5 is lost, who is the natural move. But okay, one forest here failed and he played rook h5, the natural move, but it's completely lost. Knight d4, g4. Looks like you are trading the pawn, but like I see the okay, you are taking the black pawn, but white pawn still being over the board, and this benefit the black. King c4, king g takes f5. If white manages to take this pawn out of the board, the position is a draw, but you cannot disappear your own pawns. Sorry, I make something, but okay. And now, king d3, very good move, coming closer to the white king to be checkmate. Rook h8, king e3, king f1, and here the key move, knight c2. The idea is play king here and knight e3. That's the idea of knight e2. You cannot play king f3 directly because king e1. So knight c2, not allowing the white king to escape to b3. And now the plan is king e3. First threatening checkmate, the king should go there, and now you can with knight e3 and giving checkmate to the white king. And if white having this pawn on f4, he can just give check on f1 one day and make an easy draw. But the pawn benefit black. Rook b8, rook f2 and knight d4. Now that's the other idea of knight 2. Now the knight is coming, well, more than 2, the knight is coming to f3, followed by rook a2 with a checkmate, and the knight on d4 is defending b3 too. So yes, interesting game by Sindarov, who maybe his only bad move of the game was in the move. Let's see, I can find the moment. Yes, first, till here was a correct game. Sorry, till here was a good game for both sides, but Van Forest should just accept that the game is a draw, enter into the last round as a leader, take on c6, and yes, no more. But here it's completely crazy, and he sacrifice everything with rook c1, just giving the pawn for nothing. And okay, Van Forest get a completely winning position, but here he fails so much playing before and allowing black to trade many pawns. And they reach this key position, who is very interesting. And very hard to play in the game to understand that rook h5 is a natural move lost. And this line is very interesting. Rook f8, giving free to the rook to b6. So very good game of Sindarov, who takes down another leader. And now for the last round, we have Fabiano Caruana and Vincent Keimer tied in the first place, with with Sindarov half point behind. So let's see how ends the tournament. Bye bye.